Welcome to episode 74.
Hey, this is John Lee Dumas of EO Fire, and you're listening to Who Did That Voice, where we take an in-depth look at voiceovers.
Ready to take a vacay, but you just don't have the time to plan? Let the agents at 3D Travel Company pamper you and take care of all the little details. Find us at www.whodidthatvoice.co and click the Book Now button on the left-hand side. For a limited time, Who Did That Voice listeners can receive a Disney gift card for qualifying Disney and Universal trips, booked and traveled by 2017. Hurry and book today so you can travel away.
Welcome to Who Did That Voice, the show where we take an in-depth look at voiceover. And now, here's your host, Trenton Larkin.
Hey everyone, just wanted to let you know we have launched a Patreon page. You can find us at www.patreon.com/whodidthatvoice. What is Patreon, you say? Well, it's a lot like a Kickstarter or Indiegogo campaign that allows you to help support us on a monthly basis. For as little as $1 a month, you can help support the show and earn amazing perks. Help us out today and join the Who Did That Voice family in a new way. This week on Who Did That Voice, the boy wonder himself, Robin, does an interview. When is a superhero not a superhero? When you interview his alter ego.
All should have been back by now with Batman's scalp. I wonder what went awry.
You went awry, Riddler, years ago. Don't you know that crime never pays? Bruce, Christmas sure came early this year.
Yes, it did, Dick, thanks to Aunt Harriet.
Or this slot car raceway, it's the coolest, Aunt Harriet.
Poor people have it. Rich people need it. If you eat it, you die. What is it?
Nothing.
I can't come up with anything either, Batman.
No, Chief. The answer is nothing.
Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Who Did That Voice. Today I am beyond excited to introduce you to the boy wonder himself, Robin, played by none other than Burt Ward. Burt, thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
Hello, citizen.
Well, Burt, it is such an honor to have you on the show. My parents raised me on the Batman from '66, and I am super excited to be talking with you today.
Well, thank you. That's very nice, and just shows that you have excellent taste.
I do think so. I do. Well, Burt, the very first thing we like to do on the show when we have a special guest for the first time is just to get to know them a little bit. So tell us about Burt, the little boy that grew up into the man that you are today, and how did you get into acting, and especially playing the role of Robin on the television series back in '66?
Well, I think of myself still as a little boy. I never grew up, but I started. My father believed in an early work ethic, so he started me working in his ice show. My father owned the predecessor to Ice Capades. At the time, it was called Rhapsody on Ice, and he put me to work at age 2. Now, I thought that might be a little young, but he thought that was good ethics to start young. And in that show, he had a lot of professional ice skaters. And at one point in the show, they would announce that I was going to be coming out, and they'd have 2 of their top skaters, one kind of holding my hand on each side and take me around, and the kind of the arena. And then after doing that, and everybody was clapping. They thought that was going to be it. But then they let go of me, and I skated by myself, and people were like, couldn't believe it. 2-year-old skating. So
that's amazing.
And I do remember a little bit about it. I don't remember a lot of details, but I remember skating, and I remember that I was in the dark. You know what I mean? Or I should say that the people were in the dark, and I was in the light, so I couldn't see people's faces, but I could hear them. Yeah. And so that was my first experience as a performer at age 2. I grew up in Beverly Hills, California. My father ended up selling the show and becoming a prominent real estate agent and broker. And I went to Beverly High, went to UCLA, UCSB. That's University of Los Angeles, Santa Barbara for a semester. And then 2 years at UCLA. And I was studying acting. I wanted to be an actor. I actually, as a child growing up, I remember when I was about 4 years of age that I was very, I should say, enthralled with Superman. Where I lived, they had Superman comics, Superboy comics, but no Batman comics. Never heard of that. Never knew anything about it.
Wow.
So my mother showed me when I grew up that she had taken pictures of me on my tricycle when I was like 3 or 4 years of age with a bath towel around my neck held together with a clothespin. And so I wanted to be a crime fighter. And, I actually believe that thoughts can be things if you concentrate on it, hard enough and long enough. So anyway, I remember I was helping my father with real estate, and I was helping him sell houses on the weekends when I wasn't going to UCLA, and I helped him sell a house to a well-known Hollywood producer, and the producer was nice enough to watch a scene that I did. In fact, said, I'll tell you what, I'm going to send you to an agent. And he sent me to see an agent who was not terribly enthralled to have any additional clients. First thing he said to me is, well, I can't get work for the actors I've got. I would never take you, but if it wasn't for this producer, I've got to take you now. And so don't expect to work for a year. And if you do, you probably get a one-liner. I mean, that's not very encouraging.
No way.
So I didn't hear anything for a couple of weeks, and I didn't even meet the man. This was on the telephone, And and then a couple of weeks later, I got a call from someone in his office. Sounded like a secretary. He said, well, there's something going on over 20th Century Fox. You've got a 3:30 appointment or something like that. Go see this casting director. So I got the address. I drove over there. I was 20 years of age, and they let me on the lot, and then they told me where I had to go to meet this casting director, which I did, and he was very nice. He said, would you like to meet the executive producer? And I said, sure. I figured everybody got to meet the executive producer. Well, that's actually not true. So I went in to meet the executive producer, who I walked in and I said, hello, sir. And I shook his hand very firmly and looked him right in the eye. And I think he was a little taken aback by my aggressiveness, even though it was nice aggression. I was still pretty aggressive. And he said, well, you're kind of big for this part. I said, well, sir, I promise you I won't grow anymore. And he laughed. I mean, he couldn't believe, how could anybody stop growing, right? If you can't will that.
Yeah.
So he said, would you like to do a screen test? And I said, sure. I mean, I figured everybody got to do a screen test. Well, again, that's not necessarily true at all. So it was arranged that a couple of weeks later, I went into the studio, but I had no idea what I was trying out for. Nobody told me anything. And when I was there, they had me just in my regular civilian clothes, and they introduced me to another actor named Adam West. And for about 10 or 15 minutes before the screen test, he and I talked, and in 5 minutes, the two of us were laughing, and we got along amazingly well. And then when it came for the screen test, they handed me 2 sheets of paper, which had dialogue on it. And the only names that were on that sheet of paper was Bruce with certain lines to say and Dick with certain lines to say. No last names, no title of a show, no nothing, just Bruce and Dick. You know what I mean?
Wow. Yeah.
So, and it wasn't there wasn't any earth-shaking thing that, it was just basic dialogue talking between the two of us, which I did. And they said, okay, well, that's good. And I said, well, thank you very much. And I started to leave. And they said, whoa, wait a minute. We're not done with you yet. We want you to go over to this dressing room over there on the other side of the sound stage. And we have 2 wardrobe men who are waiting for you to help you get dressed. And I stopped for a minute. And I said, well, I'm perfectly capable of dressing myself. I don't need help. They said, oh, no, you don't understand. You don't understand. You just go over there. You'll find out. So I was kind of like a little stunned and caught off guard. But I went over to the dressing room, and sure enough, there were 2 people there waiting for me. And I looked onto this, it looked like a bed or a cot, but it was very long, maybe like a couch without a back. And all this stuff on there, I mean, like T-shirts and cape and vest and boots and gloves and mask and, shorts, and all, everything, leotards, all this kind of stuff. And I said, do I have to put some of this on? They said, no, you have to put all of it on.
Wow.
And I'm telling
That's
you,
crazy.
they helped me get dressed, and it was the worst experience I thought I'd ever had at the time. I mean, that was so incredibly uncomfortable. And finally, I'm hobbling to walk in this contraption. You know what I mean? And as I'm going out the dressing room door, I turned to one of them and said, well, I guess the good news is that once this screen test is over, I'll never have to put this stuff on again. Okay, well, famous last words, right?
Yeah,
so,
definitely.
And then I walk over to the set. I mean, it took me a while to get there because I'm just so uncomfortable. I got to be honest with you, man is not built for tights, okay? It's really not the right thing. So I go over there, and there is this actor, Adam West, only he is in this other god-awful contraption with a really long cape and a cowl over his head. So all I could do is basically see his jaw, and when I looked him in the eye, it was funny the way his eyes and his head fit in that cowl. He looked cross-eyed, which I found to be quite funny,
Yeah.
So we had this dialogue, and again, there was nobody said this is Batman or this is Robin or this is a TV show or that this is a cartoon or that this is a comic book, nothing. And I did my lines, and then I also had some martial arts. I got changed out of that costume, and before I left, I did a kind of a demonstration of martial arts, and I had been studying karate, and this goes back to 1959 when I think it first came to the United States. And so I had studied, and I was a brown belt at the time, and I did some stuff. I broke a board with my hand, and which, they were all amazed. In today's world, a lot of people can do it, but not then. So anyway, I left, and then for 6 weeks I heard nothing, except after 2 weeks I started getting phone calls from the studio. Mr. Ward, can you tell us your shoe size? Oh, okay, 7.5. All right. And then they call back, and what's your hat size? Well, I don't wear a hat. Well, you need to go get your head measured. Well, who's going to measure my head? Well, go see a tailor. They can measure your head. And, what's your glove size? Well, I don't know. I don't wear gloves. All of this kind of stuff. And I couldn't understand, why are they continually calling me and asking me these questions? Well, it turns out that at the end of 6 weeks, I get a call from that same agent that was totally uninterested in me. Said, would you like to come in? We're gonna assign you to some contracts. And I said, oh wow, the agent's gonna really formally represent me now. That's a step in the right direction. So I go in I found their office, and I went in there and I sat down, and they said, here, all ready for you to sign. I said, great. And I looked down on the paper, but it didn't have their agency name. It said 20th Century Fox. I said, well, wait a minute, what's this? I came to sign agency contracts. They said, no. It's got nothing to do with agency contracts. This is your contract with 20th Century Fox. You got the role of Robin. I said, I did?
Oh, wow.
They said, you mean you didn't know? I said, no, I didn't know. They said, you mean the studio didn't tell you? I said, no. And later on, when I spoke to the people at the studio, they said, you mean the agents didn't tell you? So here I had the part of Robin for 4 weeks, of the last 4 weeks of the 6 weeks, and I didn't even know, and nobody had told me. So anyway, I got the role, and then I went in. I remember going in to meet the executive producer, and he said to me, Burt, he said, would you like to know why we hired you? I said, yes, sir, I would. He said, well, we interviewed 1,100 young actors, and that's a lot of people. 1,100 we interviewed. And the reason we selected you, Burt, is because in our minds, forgetting a television show, forgetting that, if there really was a Robin, I mean, for real, we think that you personally would be it. So we don't want you to, quote, act. We really want you to just be yourself and be enthusiastic, and that's all we want from you. I said, well, gee, that's easy enough. I'm already enthusiastic, and it's not hard being myself. I am myself. So anyway, that's what I did for 120 episodes. And I guess because the crew was very large, like 80 men on the crew, which is just about a double-sized crew because of all the explosion and special effects and unique sets and all this unique hardware, all this kind of stuff, that as far as my acting and Adam's acting was concerned, other than telling us, well, you had to be, go sit in the Batmobile when you say this line or whatever, some details like that. Other than that, we were left to do whatever we wanted. So when you saw me jump over the door and land on the seat in the car, or getting out of the car, jumping over the door, getting out, or standing up on the door and walking on the edge of the car on the fins to the back, that was all me doing it with nobody stopping me. Later on, I found out that the guy that George Barris had built the Batmobile nearly had a heart attack when he saw me do that because of his paint job. But
yeah,
I mean, hey, that was part of, I just did whatever I thought was right. I hit my fist into my palm. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that I did, and nobody said do this or don't do this, and I had a lot of freedom.
Wow. But it made it so natural because it felt so real, and that has to be a big reason why.
Oh, absolutely. And Adam and I mean, you can go, your listeners can go on to the internet and watch my screen test, okay? And they can also watch the screen test of another young actor, Peter Dial and Lyle Wagner, who were the other two that screen tested at that time. Now, Lyle Wagner is a fine actor with a lot of experience, but if you look at the way he and the other young actor played their version of these roles, you'll see that they played them basically very serious. I mean, there was really nothing funny about it. Whereas Adam and I, we played it serious, but only serious to an extent. We had a whole different level of an approach. Ours was multi-level. For the kids, we played it serious because we wanted them to hero worship and, riding in the Batmobile, climbing walls, fighting heinous villains, all for the, all for the American good, And for the adults, it was the nostalgia of the comic book. But for the teenagers and the college kids, this was a group of people that the networks basically had given up on. They just couldn't find any way to attract them because they were just too demanding an audience. They didn't want just the plain old dry hamburger, so to speak. So our double meanings and insinuations and suggestive things that we did, oh my gosh, they went nuts over. And of course, so did the censors, because just about every week the censors came to visit us and chew us out, saying, "You can't do that. You can't say that. And I don't. We were very innocent, like, "Oh, gee, we never thought we were doing anything wrong," and then turn around and do it again.
Well, I mean, it made the show so epic, and hearing about your background as a young skater in your dad's show at 2 years old, it kind of makes me feel like you grew up as Dick Grayson almost, because his family was in the circus and they were acrobats. And so you have a very similar upbringing with the martial arts. And it's just like, I see these parallels, and it makes it just the perfect role for you. And I can see why the producers were like, if there really was a Robin in real life, you would be it. I totally agree.
Right. And, it's so funny when I would meet people, even when I wasn't in costume, just meeting people, they'd say, "Oh, wow, you look like yourself." Well, yeah. "Oh, wow, you sound like yourself." Well, yeah. I mean, and it's like, and it's so funny because when I was filming, you have to understand, at the time I was 20 years of age. I got the part when I was 20. My parents had to actually take me to court where I had to have a judge approve me, because I wasn't 21 years of age to legally sign the contract. And when I was working on that show, I mean, here I was working 5 days a week, at minimum 12 hours a day, sometimes 14. And I'm on a big cold sound stage. The the way it works is you wait. In fact, there's a famous line in show business, hurry up and wait, where, I would sit around for 45 minutes, on a cold, damp soundstage, usually partially in my costume, wearing a robe to stay warm. And you wait for 45 minutes, and you work for 30 seconds. And you wait another 45 minutes, and you work for another 30 seconds, okay? Just imagine doing that all day long. Well, I didn't have a lot of people to talk to that were my age. I was 20. The next youngest person on the set was Adam, who was 37. That's 17 years. I mean, that wasn't exactly, similar ages. And the rest of the crew were all in their 50s and 60s, because these were all the top experts, cameramen, gaffers, lighters, all the kind of stuff. These guys were the best of the best. 20th Century Fox had the fantastic crew. But there wasn't a lot of, camaraderie for me to talk to, or, there wasn't a lot that they wanted to say to me or me say to them. So I sat around, read, just waited and stuff like that. It wasn't until that I came home on the night that the show aired, January 12th, 1966, and I watched it for the first time, and I was really blown away. I said, wow, this is really good. I mean, you have to understand, I didn't hear any of the Batman theme music before it aired. I didn't hear any of the, screeching tires and the fire coming out of the back of the Batmobile and the roar of the turbine engines and, the pows and zaps over the fight scenes and the explosive graphics and the sound effects and, all of this stuff. And the villains, whenever the villains were shot in their hideout, there was always shot at an angle. And I couldn't understand why. I said, what's the matter? These guys are cameramen. They got a problem. They can't keep the camera straight. And it turned out, when I asked about it, they said, oh, we did it intentionally. I said, why would you turn the camera, and not be level? Why would you do it intentionally? They said, we did it because the villains were crooked. So we shot it at a crooked angle. Well, I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
And I've been on the show for several years. Still didn't know the last year of the show. And so anyway, it was a lot of fun. But when I made my first personal appearance, now that's when all of a sudden I saw how people reacted. And this was in Tacoma, Washington. This was in, I think it was about March or April of 1966. Adam, that weekend, was going to New York to be in Shea Stadium. He had a huge event where they, I think, sold out, or almost all the seats were sold out in Shea Stadium, where he arrived in the Bat-Copter, landed right in the stadium, and oh my God, it was tremendous. But
that sounds epic.
Yeah, and then I was in Tacoma, Washington, at a kind of like a shopping mall. It was a huge location, but I mean, and I'm appearing by myself. And when I arrived on Friday before the Saturday appearance, they told me that as of that Wednesday, 2 days before, you couldn't get within 6 blocks of that mall. There were people in tents sleeping out, waiting for this appearance, and that they were handing out raffle tickets. And as I later found out, more than 310,000 raffle tickets were handed out the week before and then during the 2 days of my appearance. That's a lot of raffles. That's a lot of attendees,
Wow.
And they had
that
rented.
Was just a couple of months after the show had launched.
That's right. Well, because the ratings, the first night, a 55 share, which meant that in all of North America, that of all the televisions turned on that night, that first night on Tuesday, okay, that 55% of all the TVs in North America were watching Batman, and the other 45% were spread out among a whole bunch of other stations, both local, regional, and national. And I mean, it was huge. It was like bigger than Super Bowl in terms of turnout.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. It was amazing. And so, in any event, I mean, and a funny thing, there's all kinds of funny things that happen, and they had the people putting on this event had rented the University of Washington football team, kind of like, not bodyguards, but just to keep, things, separate, people, I couldn't get hurt and all kind of stuff. And I dressed was like the opposite end of this incredibly huge mall type building. Okay. Yeah. And I'll never forget it. I had all these big football players around me, and I'm dressed as Robin, and I'm walking down this like mall, like the inside of these big malls are huge, where, very wide. And coming the other direction were these two elderly women, okay? Two elderly women. Okay. And apparently they hadn't seen Batman, okay? Because when they saw me, one of them turned to the other and said, damn hippie.
Wow.
He thought I was a hippie, but it was a great appearance. It turned out really well. And from there, one thing led to another, and I've been doing appearances for over 50 years. The crowds have only seemed to get bigger and bigger. A couple of months ago in Dallas, Adam West and I were together. 60,000 paid attendants to come see us. And a couple of months before that, Toronto, Canada, 160,000 paid attendants to see us. So,
wow.
I mean, certainly when our show was airing, I mean, it was so crazy. I mean, they had every Batman hairdos, and kids were jumping off their couches, and I mean, it was an amazing phenomenon. It really was. And even today, the Batman merchandise is amazing. They have a Batman 66 comic book series. There is every kind of toy you can imagine. Mattel has these Batmobiles with, Batman characters in them with masks. There are figurines that are selling for $500 to $800 that look exactly like me. I mean, just exactly. Yeah. I mean, if you take a photograph of it, and it looks like somebody took a photograph of me. And the same with Adam, And anyway, it's just become a really big thing. And so I still go out, and I've been doing this with Adam for many, many years. We go out and we make these appearances, and more recently, I think at comic conventions, these comic cons, very popular, very and huge turnouts.
Oh yeah, it's amazing that you guys have been able to do that, and I know Batman has been going now for 51 years for you and Adam, and sadly he has passed, but I'm so glad that we're able to talk about this. And speaking about toys, I'm actually a collector of Batmobiles, so I definitely have the 66 Batmobile along with a lot of others.
Well, they have some newer ones in different sizes, and they have figurines that are in the Batmobiles, and I mean, it's just one thing after another, and I mean, and they have some pretty spectacular licensed merchandise. There are, for example, one-armed bandits that are 11 and a half feet tall with four bigger-than-life photos of Adam and I, and apparently they pay very well, so I've heard very good things about that. And recently, Stern Pinball came out with a Batman 66 pinball machine, and I got one of those. And it's fantastic. I mean, I recorded over 300 voices for it. So did Adam, and it's like watching the show. And it has a HD screen on it. It's got stereophonic sound, and this pinball machine projects the bat signal on your ceiling.
Oh, that's epic! I've got to get one.
Yeah, they're fabulous.
Well, that is fantastic.
It's tremendous interest, and now I have, of course, I recently, last November, there was an animated feature from Warner Brothers that Adam and I starred in with our voices, Batman Return of the Caped Crusaders. And now we have a new one coming out this I believe October, November. I don't know exactly the date, but I'll tell you something. It's going to be gigantic. It is huge. It is Batman versus Two-Face, and in fact, they just released the trailer, which your listeners can go out and see on the internet. The trailer for the new Batman versus Two-Face, and the trailer. I mean, the character Two-Face. Okay, there's lots of villains, a whole bunch of them, but the main villain is Two-Face, who is being portrayed by none other than William Shatner. Okay, so here you have the two most iconic television shows in history, Batman and Star Trek, with the actors working together.
That's super epic. And your show is coming out October 17th, 2017. People can get Batman versus Two-Face.
Yeah, I knew it was coming out. I wasn't sure it was October, November, but let me tell you something. I've seen a little bit of it, okay? And that's because when I recorded the dialogue and then they do the animation to it, sometimes you have to go back and, match dialogue to the picture. So they have to actually play a scene where then I say my lines live, you know what I mean, and they record it. But what I saw of it, it is incredible animation. It is like a giant step beyond last year's film, which was very good. In fact, it was voted the best Batman feature film of 2016, and that meant up against even Batman versus Superman. And
I would totally agree.
Yeah, but this one is wow. If what I saw is an indication of what it is, it's going to be gigantic. It's going to be like our series was, in my opinion. It's going to be huge. And casting William Shatner, and I've heard his voice as the character. Okay, he is unbelievable. I mean, I've always respected him as a fine actor, but what he does with this, the character and the voice, is spectacular. People are going to be just blown away.
Well, I am looking forward to it. When I watched Batman Return of the Caped Crusaders, I was so excited to see you guys back on the big screen because Batman has always been epic, but the way they did the animated feature, it took me back to the old days of the TV show reruns when I was growing up because it was super epic.
I agree with you.
Well, voicing in these two features that have come out last year and this year, 2017, you guys also are no strangers to animated features, as you and Adam both worked on the New Adventures of Batman back in '77. So was that your first animation project, Burt?
It could have been, but I've done other things, and I just don't remember if that was the first or not. But since then, of course, I've done, I was on a whole bunch of different shows, Futurama. I was on The Simpsons. They had a show with Adam and I on it. I've been on a whole bunch of shows, and in fact, there's this Robot Chicken. Did you see my performance on Robot Chicken?
Yes, epic.
I was epic. The person in the only cast member that actually had two roles. One was Robin and one was being Burt Ward, and they drew a character. They drew me, Burt Ward, and it was terrific. I mean, I was a little shocked. I couldn't actually believe that some of that dialogue that Warner Brothers and DC Comics would approve that, but they did, and it's hilarious, absolutely hilarious.
Absolutely. Well, it's amazing that you've been a part of both, television and animated features because they both have a high impact. And Batman and Robin have always been something super epic and special in my life, and I know for millions and millions of other people, it's meant a lot to them as well. I really wanted to talk with you as well. Thank you so much for diving into Robin and some of the amazing stories you've told today, and the new feature films. I cannot wait for this one coming in October. But I really wanted to learn a little bit more about Gentle Giants. What can you tell me about that, Burt?
The best way to describe it is and Warner Brothers loves the way I describe it. I like to say that I was the Caped Crusader, and now I am the Canine Crusader. And just like saving people in Gotham City from heinous villains, for the last 23 years, my wife and I have rescued dogs, primarily giant breed dogs. And we've actually rescued more than 15,500 dogs, every one of which would have been put to death if we hadn't been there to save them. And we provided them food and shelter. We provided them love, complete medical care, and found each and every one a safe, loving home. So
That's wonderful.
But I got to tell you, by rescuing the giant breeds and which traditionally have the shortest lifespan, when we would lose one of these dogs, we would be just devastated. You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah.
Because their lifespan was so terribly short. And my wife and I vowed that if there was a way that we could find to help these gentle giants live longer, that we would certainly do that. And because all of these dogs have actually lived in our house with us, we don't have yards that dogs are in. We don't have pens or cages or whatever, other buildings that we stick them in. They live in our house with us as a family. Wow. And just imagine for 23 years to have, as many as 50 or sometimes more dogs living in your home with you at the same time you're living in the home, right? I mean, but they're not in anything. There's not a garage that they're in. There's not a laundry room. I mean, they're living where we live, in the main living area of our home. And we've learned so much about them. But the first thing we did is we created a feeding and care program. We feed and care for dogs differently than other people do. And your listeners can go to our websites. We have a GentleGiantsRescue.com website. We have a Gentle Giants dog food website, and they can learn how we feed and care for dogs and how we have them living incredibly long lives. Initially, just by the way we changed how we fed and cared for the dogs, we added an average of 3 years to every dog's life. So our Great Danes, our Great Danes that were living 7 to 9 years, when we fully developed our program, were living 10 to 12 years. That's a huge uptick there. And we came to a point where we decided that we couldn't go any further if we didn't change their food. And we didn't have any great expectations. We just thought that if we made the very best food possible, the very best of the best, and we were really only making it for our own dogs here, we never thought of selling the food. I mean, we're so consumed with having, 50 or more dogs in your house, caring for them with all the issues they have. It's like we became almost like hermits, But we when we went to make the food, we just figured we'd make the best of the best. And maybe we could pull out a year and a half maybe, add to each dog's life. That was our hope. But what we found out turned out to be so devastating to us that it changed our lives forever. And what we found out was this, that the companies that make dog food know something the average person doesn't know, which is the more fat content they put in dog food, the hungrier it makes dogs.
Interesting.
And in our opinion, it is all about money. It isn't about love of animals. It is all about money. And,
sadly.
I'll give you a human example. Do you remember 6 years ago, there was a guy that went into a McDonald's in Ohio and ate at that McDonald's every meal for a month.
I remember that.
Morgan Spurlock. He gained 55 pounds and almost died. They made a movie about him, Super Size Me. That was the movie. A lot of people saw that. And after that, I think McDonald's added a whole healthy diet to their menu, which was great that they did that. But the fact is, that man almost died. Well, what I'm describing, that the dog food companies are injecting massive amounts of fat into their food, is affecting dogs the same way. I mean, more than half of the dogs in America are obese. They're overweight. All you have to do, and your listeners, if they want to verify what I'm saying, whatever dog food they're feeding, turn the bag over. Look on the back of the bag next to the ingredients. There's a chart called Guaranteed Analysis. The first item is protein. The second is crude fat. And what they're going to find is that the crude fat of what they're feeding their beloved dog is going to be somewhere between 12 to 22% crude fat. Now, 6 months ago, when I had an exam, my annual exam by my doctor, I asked him, I said, Doc, just out of curiosity, what would happen if a human being, who's obviously much better designed than a dog, what would happen if a human being ate even 12% crude fat at every meal. And without any hesitation, my doctor said, would cut your lifespan in half.
Wow.
Wow. And after doing more research, my wife and I found out that dogs, we knew they love the taste and smell of meat. What we didn't know was that dogs actually do not like the taste and smell of fat. They don't like it. So if you look at any dog food, just about any food out there, okay, what you'll find, if you pick it up in your fingers and you rub it, you'll say, oh, this dog food is greasy on the outside. Well, why is that grease there? Well, because dogs don't want to eat food that's been filled with fat. Okay, so how do you get dogs to eat fat-saturated food? Well, the manufacturers found a way. And the way they found was to find a different kind of animal fat that they could spray on the outside of every single kibble to hide and cover up the smell of the fat on the inside of the food.
Interesting. Yeah, because I know every time I reach into the bag, it's always so oily and greasy, and you almost try not to touch the food just because of that.
Exactly. Now, let me ask you a question. Would you take bacon grease, which is an animal fat, and pour it down your garbage disposal? Would you do that?
No.
Right,
No,
because you know it would ruin it.
Yeah.
I mean, that grease, it doesn't dissolve, you know? It coagulates and becomes hard, right? And would clog your garbage disposal and ruin it, okay? Well, if animal fat will ruin a metal garbage disposal, what do you think is happening to the inside in the intestines of your beloved dog when every single kibble is encapsulated in grease? What do you think's happening?
Yeah.
It's
clogging their
prematurely
arteries and their pathways, yeah.
and prematurely killing them.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
what did we do differently? Well, we approached this from the angle that we were never trying to make any money with this. In fact, this is our charity. My wife and I don't take a dime in salary. We don't take anything from this. So, but what did we do? Well, first of all, we didn't add any extra fat. I mean, there's about 9% fat in food, about 9%. Okay, in the the chicken and the vegetables and all that stuff that we feed.
Yeah,
we don't add anything to it, nothing. So therefore, dogs love the taste and smell of our food as it is. So because of that, we don't have to spray anything on the outside to cover it up, to hide anything, you know? And our food doesn't feel greasy because it isn't greasy.
That's
and
great.
in fact, our food is so dry that if you rub the kibbles together, you could make a powder of it. So
Wow.
how does it work? Well, it's all USA made. It's called Gentle Giants. There's no chemicals. There's no preservatives. It's all natural. And the way it works is that when dogs eat it and it goes into their intestines, if you think of it this way, if you have a paper towel and you put it on something moist, like, moisture on a table, it soaks it up. Well, our very dry dog food, all of pure nutrition, but still very dry, actually absorbs the grease that's been accumulating in a dog's intestines. It absorbs it.
Wow.
And when the dog goes to the bathroom, it takes it out of the dog's body. So people tell me all the time, hundreds of emails, letters, phone calls, and we've seen it with our own dogs. After a dog has been on Gentle Giants dog food for 4 to 5 weeks, it's like having a completely different dog. The dog is healthier than it's ever been. The dog's more alert. The dog is calmer because they're not hungry all the time. And with our food is designed for dogs to self-regulate how much they eat. And you can't do that with regular dog food because the dogs would overeat.
Oh, yeah,
so
they would,
why is it important to teach a dog to self-regulate? Because when people feed a dog and give them a certain amount, they don't know for a fact if what they're giving them is the right amount. They could be giving too little, too much. They don't know. They're guessing. We don't have to guess because all of our dogs eat only what they need. They never overeat. They never gain too much weight. And they're so healthy and I'll tell you, veterinarians would not like to hear this, but our own dogs are so healthy, the only time they ever go to see a veterinarian is every 3 years for a $10 rabies update.
Wow. That's really inexpensive.
Let me tell you, I tell people all the time, all you need is 1 or 2 good vet bills, and anything you think you've saved, you haven't saved. And so anyway, our Gentle Giants food, we take, as I said, we take nothing from it. We sell it just a little bit above our cost just to make sure we don't lose money. And in fact, our motto is half the price and twice the life, because our food retails for half the price of what you would pay for an all-natural food in a pet store that won't keep your dog living up to 27 years like our dogs are living. And in fact, right now, 24 of the dogs in our rescue right now, 24 of them have already lived more than twice their normal lifespan. Now, that's consistency. That's not an anomaly. That's consistency.
Wow. Burt, I really appreciate you diving into Gentle Giants. It sounds like an amazing product, and I definitely hope people will try it out. I think it's a product well worth switching for using on our pets and love, because they are our loved ones a lot of times, and
absolutely.
we need to take care of them. So,
and by the way, I'd like to mention our Facebook page, Gentle Giants Dog Food and Products is our Facebook page, and it's an interactive page. People all the time write to it. They post photos and videos. In turn, we answer all questions, and it's very educational for people. They can learn a lot about feeding and caring for their dog, training their dog, when to take the dog to the doctor. And there's a lot of real good information there. And in addition, our dog food is available in certain stores across the country, in Walmarts, most Walmarts, and also online at Chewy.com, Walmart.com, and PetSmart.com. So those are anybody in the country can get our food, and they can get it without shipping charges, and it makes it ideal because not only are they going to save a lot of money, but far more important, their dog now can live an extra 10 to 15 years longer and healthier.
Wow, that is amazing. That is awesome to hear. Well, I have one final question for you today, Burt, and we will wrap this interview up. The question is, what is the legacy that you want to leave behind?
Well, 2 things. I have a dual objective. Okay. One objective in terms of my acting, that I want to bring people together to enjoy life and realize that life on this planet is very short, that the most precious commodity in the world is life, and that through entertainment and education that we all can be better people, and we can live with, amongst other people, and be kind to other people, and not be, negative and horrible, and just the opposite. My wife and I are the same exactly. We want to build a better world. And that's one. And the other one is that dogs are very loving. I mean, they're man's best friend. They love you no matter what, unconditionally, whether you had the best day at work or the worst day at work. Doesn't matter. They love you. And all they want is your love, and they'll give back, every bit of that love as well. And we want them to have a chance to live to their potential. And right now, our dogs are living 2 and sometimes 3 times their normal lifespan. That's how long they're living by eating Gentle Giants dog food and following our feeding and care program. So the 2 things I'd like to make a great contribution to humanity, and I'd like to make a great contribution to dogs. And just think of it this way. If you add another 5 to 10 years to each dog's life, what are you doing for the people who own them and love them? You are enriching their lives as well.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. Well, Burt, it has been an absolute honor and pleasure having you on the show today. Would you give us a special closeout today as Robin?
All right, citizens, to the Batmobile!
Atomic batteries to power. Turbines to speed.
Well, everyone, I sure hope you enjoyed today's episode with Burt Ward, the boy wonder himself, Robin. And if you did, please find me on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram by searching Who Did That Voice. I would love to hear from you. You know, a question you might ask yourself is, where can I listen to Who Did That Voice? That's an excellent question. You can hear us on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, TuneIn Radio, YouTube, and our website at www.whodidthatvoice.co. Click the Episodes tab and listen away. Well, everyone, that's all the time we have for this episode. Join us this Tuesday for our next midweek special with David Sobolov, the voice of Gorilla Grodd from The Flash. You won't want to miss this episode. Hey, do you ask yourself who did that voice? Well, if you do, go to our website, www.whodidthatvoice.co, and click on the Episodes tab. Choose an actor, pick their name, and see pictures from the different characters they've voiced in their career.
Thank you for joining us today. We'll see you next time for more discoveries on Who Did That Voice.